on.
I think pop has made itself completely irrelevant as an aesthetic form. It's like looking into a hall of mirrors where all you see is the reflection of other mirrors. There is so much shameless just adaptation of other people's style that it's almost impossible to tell one person apart from another. Individuality has been erased and wiped away.
Woo, the man of tomorrow is here, or as I used to call myself on the Hard and Fast podcast, Dragonaut 1 ready for you, baby. And someday maybe I'd pick that podcast back up. Of course, that was basically a metal show, or overall a music show, but music is what we're here for today. You are getting a Sovryn Top 8, which is basically the best of 2020, and in particular with albums. Now, 2020, not a surprise to anybody, or it's not like there isn't anybody that knows this, was an odd year, right? And, I was actually, when I was going over doing, because we do this every year where we do our kind of like our top movies, top whatever, top books for a year. And some categories like television shows or movies are actually a pretty tough thing to bring up a top 8 in. Because most of the movies that were supposed to come out in 2020, even a lot of shows that were supposed to perhaps pick up in 2020, all got pushed back into 2021. And even then, who knows? But music, albums in particular, that has not been the case. There were certainly delays throughout 2020 because there were a lot of albums that were supposed to come out like in March or even April, and they would end up getting delayed into the end of the year. But I mean, basically once, fall hit, like every week, there really was an exciting album coming out. Now I normally have it set in the recording template that I do for Sovryn Tech. I usually have it set where I have a whole segment where I bring up an album of the week, because I used to do that in the weekly Q&As and everybody really loved it. And so, when we stopped doing the Q&As because, we eliminated the paywall and so on, and we just put the Q&As into the main show, we also put the album of the week into the main show. But I haven't done one in the main show for a while because a lot of the topics that we've had to discuss were just so broad and hot that frankly, we needed all the time we could get. And if that meant knocking out, an 8-minute segment where I would talk about an album, or even 5 minutes, then that's what would happen. But so, with that said, really, there's a lot to discuss here as far as music that came out in 2020. I'll lay it out on top. Pretty much all of these are metal, or some kind of, hard rock, if you want to differentiate in that way. Now, I grant you, it's not because all I listen to is metal. I mean, I certainly listen to it a lot. I won't deny that. I mean, you could argue as far as popular genres, it's certainly, my top genre as far as popular genres. Like I said, if film scores was somehow its own genre, then that would be like the thing that I listen to the most. But I definitely listen to metal the most. I would have no problem in this top 8 with a pop album being on there. I could think of, multiple genres that I would love if they had made my top 8. Unfortunately, except for metal, it feels like, and you can correct me if I am wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. I think of like when Ellen and I go to the gym, I mean, we end up having to, we're kind of subjected to, forced to listen to just some of the most horrible music that's come out in the past year. No, all right, not all of it's horrible, but most. In fact, here's a challenge. I want you to take, I don't know, the average pop song from 1985, 86, 87. I don't know, one of those years, somewhere in there. Hell, you could even go as far as like maybe 1994, 95. And I want you to look at doesn't matter. I mean, because you can say, well, art's subjective. Okay. Art is in many ways subjective, but there are objective metrics that you can look at within art, right? how much does it reflect reality? What is its fidelity to its source material? Things like, I mean, you know, so there are some objective metrics that you can look at. Now, here is a objective metric that I need to define just a little bit. And that is, I want you to look at the lyrical density, okay, of songs, of pop songs, you know, top 40. Just go top 40. That way you don't have to worry if it's pop or what. Go to top 40 in the 1980s to top 40 in, you know, fine. If you think 2020 was, you know, a horrible year for music, then pick your year in the past, frankly, in the past 10 years. And I guarantee you, because I've looked into it, the lyrical density, and what I mean by lyrical density is, what are the, you know, how many different words are there? How, as in, not just like, you know, are they using, you know, a lot of synonyms or something? You know, did they break out of the thesaurus? Why do I always have such a hard time with that word? But did they break that out? So, I mean, that's part of it. But then also, as in, just like, you know, how much of a story is it telling? Is it repeating the same line over and over and over again? And I think you're going to find that the lyrical density of songs from, you know, 30, 40 years ago is an order of magnitude higher than songs for today. Now, a song could be whatever the fuck it wants. Okay. I really don't care. All right. But top 40 is top 40. We can use that as the gauge. That way we don't have to define it by genre or whatever. And I think there is an argument to be made that if it's got a great beat, and maybe it doesn't need a lot of words. And I know everything's kind of been shifting towards EDM anyway. I understand all of this. But point being is that you could argue the music is less intellectual, perhaps, based upon, you know, if you consider lyrics an important thing, which granted, there are a lot of people that don't. But, you know, what I've always loved in music is when it's telling me a story, you know, and there's like, I get it. You know, people just want something that they can dance to, blah, blah, blah. Like, look, hey, I can dance. Ellen, can I dance? Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. See, I can dance. I have rhythm. You understand. I'm a championship roller skater, by the way. Thank you, Ellen. But it's not that I'm against dancing. It's not that I can't dance or something along those lines. It's that I want to dance based upon largely like sort of what the lyrics are saying, you know, like I want to move with the feelings of, you know, of what the lyrics are parlaying. Okay. And so there's a dramatic difference in the lyrical density of music from, and what's behind this? Well, I mean, are people getting dumber? Sure, of course they are. They're not getting smarter, despite what people were trying to tell you for the longest time. That's clearly not true, partly because IQ's bullshit. I know, we're just doing a music special here. How did it get into this? But yes, people are getting dumber. You know, I'll say this, okay, and then we really will get into the top 8 for 2020, because there, you know, as much as I'm complaining about music, there's been some amazing albums, some of the best albums ever made that have come out this year, and I'm not exaggerating. Okay. I think that the music industry, you know, yes, there's like, we all know, and people have talked about this, that there is like a formula for pop music that, you know, makes it catchy or an earworm, or that, you know, gives it the hook and everything that gets people liking and listening to it. I think the music industry as a whole, minus certain genres, particularly like metal, folk music, sure, but is that even music? You know, I mean, come on. If I have to listen to the fucking, what is it? The mandolin? I don't know, whatever that dung, 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 that every little Silicon Valley company puts behind their fucking commercial, and it makes me want to jam a pencil in my ear. You know, beyond that, okay, the lyrical density of everything, I think, has dropped because the music industry knows that, you know, they want it to have as few lyrics as possible. That way it is, quote unquote, as applicable to everyone as possible. Right? Like, here's an example, actually a metal example. Motley Crue, You're All I Need, from 1987's Girls, Girls, Girls. Heart-wrenching song. In fact, it's notorious. Doc McGee, the manager for many bands throughout time, Kiss, Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, and so on. Maybe he didn't he managed Bon Jovi. Anyway, Doc McGee would tell the story where he was talking to John Bon Jovi, And we're going to talk about Bon Jovi later in this episode as well. And John Bon Jovi heard the song You're All I Need by Motley Crue and said, this is it. It's like, I'm out of a career. He's like, that's the greatest ballad ever made. And I'm done. And Doc McGee says, John, did you listen to the lyrics? Because the whole song's about murder. It's not a love song, like, really at all. Like, it's a very twisted, dark song. I mean, which of course, someone like Nikki Sixx would come up with. And I say that with respect. My point being, if the song You're All I Need didn't have the, didn't have the lyrical density and depth that it has, where what it's about. I mean, clearly John Bon Jovi, like many, didn't listen to the lyrics, but when you know the lyrics, you know what it's about, and what could be, a song that could get played, at weddings, and probably would have been very popular at weddings. That really can't be done, because if you played it at a wedding, everybody would be like, wait a minute, this is about a guy killing his girlfriend, right? And so the music industry, I think, when they somehow find an original beat, which, even that seems to be a matter of luck these days. When they find an original beat, they don't want to put a whole lot of lyrical density to it, because they want it to be as applicable to any given situation or any person as possible. I guess, hopefully, so it streams more, because not that they plan on albums selling. I don't, whatever their metric of success happens to be. But I think that's really what's going on here as to why the lyrical density has dropped precipitously over the decades. And it's a shame, because really, lyrical density is what could make often very unoriginal beats, and melodies, could turn them into a very original song. It's really a pity that it's gone that way. But then, as we all know, or I hope that we know, the music industry has never been interested in making great music. They've always been interested in just making good enough music. And they've always been terrified of another John Lennon, right? They never want any musician to get too big, to where they become bigger than the industry itself. They despise that. Now, metal, it seems, is basically, well, partly due to, I want to say, Europe, because it is such a powerhouse outside of the American music industry. Really, it's going through a renaissance. A, has been for a few years now, but B, it has not had that issue of a lack of lyrical density. In many ways, it's even scaled up as far as that goes, which I applaud. So if you're wondering, gee, Stallion, why is there all metal on here? Sure, yes, I am, if you want to banty around the word metalhead, that's fine. Sure, I am a fan of metal, but it's more than that. It's that if you're looking for, in my opinion, if you're looking for intellectual music, music with some really deep meaning and something that you can listen to over and over again, not because it's an earworm, but because you're trying to capture the essence of everything that's within, the 3 to hell. I mean, metal could be 30 minutes of a song. That's why you're doing it, right? I mean, how many of us are so thankful that Dream Theater is still out there, and we can actually have complex fucking music, right? Damn Skippy. So anyway, and as much as I would have loved, well, Dream Theater did come out with a live album this year. I'm not including, like, there were a lot of reissues in 2020. I mean, there were an ass ton of reissues that came out in 2020, a lot of which were, remasters and really well done. I mean, it's just, especially if you're, a rock fan of any kind. I mean, there has been so much that's come out in 2020. There have been a ton of live albums that had come out. Like I said, Dream Theater had one come out. I'm not including really any of those. I might have been tempted to put in live albums if live albums were once again made as live albums once were. It used to be that live albums, or there was a kind of a golden era where live albums would come along with 2 to 4 new studio tracks. That way you'd want to buy the album, right? And I always thought that was a great marketing move. Greatest hits are supposed to do the same thing, right? Where a greatest hits album, it's going to be like, 18 hits and maybe 2 new songs. That's how you're supposed to do a greatest hits. And partly that's to show you that the band's not done yet either, even though they're putting out effectively one form or another of compilations. So yeah, there's a lot of metal on here. bottom line. And that's why. But I am also, so we'll get into a top 8, but I am also going to talk about maybe some of the big disappointments of this year. And I also want to add in a couple of bonus albums that I know I did not get to that have come out in the past couple of years that I either just suddenly was they came to light for me, or, I was just enlightened to them, whatever. But that I think should be in your repertoire of new music that you're going to listen to if you haven't checked any of it out that I am going to lay out here. So let's start this baby off. Why don't we go ahead and get right into it? Because this doesn't have to be a terribly long episode. But like I said, there really is a lot to talk about here because there's been so much great music that has come out in 2020. It's one of the few industries that just kept putting it out there. We could talk for a good long while. I mean, I could easily do a top 100 this year. Yes, that many albums came out that I think are worth listening to. Could you possibly listen to all 100 of them? Well, the only way I could is because usually I listen to Ellen and I'll listen to these albums while we're working out or something like that. And we get to taste them a bit. So anyway, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's really do it. Let's get into the top 8 and then we'll get into some notable and maybe not so notable mentions at the end. How do I want to do this? Okay. We'll start from 8. Because this is a case, usually I say, it doesn't, like if you're in the top 8, you're already one of the best, so it doesn't really matter what order they're in. But this is a case where, number 1 is number 1 with a bullet. I mean, like it's so a cut above everything else. Number 2 is a cut above, a cut above everything else. I think this is a case where it matters. So we're going to do it in that order. So we'll start at the least of the top 8. But again, yes, it's still true. They're in the top 8, so they're fucking worth listening to. But we'll start with the top 8 and we'll work our way to number 1. Here we go. Number 8 is a completely new band, which I love getting to, find, like a totally new band that just out of nowhere, hits it right out of the park on their first outing. There's the old argument in the music business that your first album is easy. It's the sophomore, it's the second and third. Those are the challenges, right? Because you're putting everything you've got into your first one. But then what do you have after that? But this is one, boy, I mean, these guys really hit it. I mean, this is some old school shit. It's new, came out in 2020. It's by a band called Neptune, and the album is called Northern Steel. This plays like, of course, with modern production values, but it plays like really some old school Iron Maiden or even Dio, like early 80s kind of stuff. And it's just got a great marching, rolling beat to it. That is, and all the songs, it sticks within its lane more or less. But the first song on it, it has, kind of that intro track like many epic albums do. But the first real song on it is called Viking Stone. And man, you'll be humming that and singing that for days, weeks, even. It just picks up and just has that really, really hard groove that you don't get in a lot of songs, certainly not anymore. But they delivered it. And it goes right on. Last Man Standing, the song after that is fantastic. And it just keeps going. And it has, I wouldn't call it folk metal. This isn't Dimmu Borgir or anything like that. It certainly has a theme, it's in the name, right? Northern Steel. It's clearly talking about Vikings and Nordic shit and all that. And I don't mind that it has that theme. It works, if you were to call it like warrior music, I get that. A lot of fun what Neptune brought out. And it's funny. It's not until you hear it that you realize it's been missing for a long time. But they're not the only ones. Let's go to number 7, very much a companion piece to Neptune's Northern Steel. And this is by a band called Eternal Champion. Now, they had and I didn't know this until I heard their 2020 album. They had an album come out in 2016 called The Armor of Ire. And that album's not bad. But their new album, Ravening Iron, or would it be Ravening Iron? I'm not sure which one it is. Maybe it's Ravening Iron. Anyway, I can't imagine it be ravening. What the fuck does ravening even mean? But this album is one of another case where you don't know it's been missing until you hear it again. It's funny because, so this came out, I want to say in November of this year, the Eternal Champions, new album came out. Now, I don't know if they took the name from the classic Sega Genesis Fighter, which was an awesome game, by the way. I'm not sure, but regardless, it's a good name. The cover art is certainly what caught me. It's cover art in the style of, like a Boris Vallejo or like a Frank Frazetta, that kind of style, which, I can dig that, right? Like that's the same style that Manowar would have on it. But then that's the thing. As soon as I turned it on, I instantly thought about Manowar. Now, what was funny was that just a couple weeks previous to Eternal Champion's new album coming out, I was like, man, there's nobody that really makes music like Manowar. Maybe that's why Manowar is still so successful and everybody still goes apeshit about him, because no one else really pulls it off. There are bands like Glory Hammer that do it like in a joking way. They're kind of, they're a parody of sorts almost. And of course, then there's Nanowar. That's a whole other story. But no one that really seems to, I'm sure Manowar knows, that the tongue's in cheek, but they take it fucking seriously. And it's like the old saying that if something's sincere enough, you accept it and you believe it. And there's no one who just seems to deliver that kind of metal. Even Neptune still felt like they were, sort of being a little too tongue-in-cheek, right? A little too self-aware, perhaps, to where it wasn't getting taken seriously enough. Now, it's great music still, but it wasn't necessarily getting taken seriously enough. Eternal Champion takes this shit seriously. And they open it right up, Face in the Glare, Skull Seeker, and it's just heavy. And it's that warrior rock right from the opening. And I don't know much about the band really at all. But somebody's got to carry on, Manowar's a legacy, in my opinion. I don't necessarily want, someone else taking the place in Manowar. Those certainly, there have been some group members that have come and gone within, their number. But I really wish there was more music like that, because it's a very unique style and you can have fun with it. And you know where it's coming from and what the abstract attitude behind it is. Right. And yeah, I feel like Eternal Champion just hit it. Somehow they picked up on that and they ran with it and they took it. They played it with sincerity. I don't want to say they took it seriously, but because again, I don't know that Manowar even takes itself that seriously, but they played it with absolute sincerity. And that was beautiful. So Eternal Champion, Ravening Iron, I'm going to call it that. Check it out. Awesome album. Not a long one either, but it's solid. Number six is an album that probably wouldn't surprise anybody that it's on this list. And that is from one of my favorite artists of all time, and someone who I actually reached out to a few years ago to ask if he would do the opening theme for Sovryn Tech. Now, in one sense, I'm kind of glad, that didn't go anywhere, because I've come to enjoy, changing up the theme music and redoing the theme at least once a year, sometimes even twice a year. Because if this guy did my theme, I'd never change it, just out of respect to how damn good he is. And that, of course, is Stan Bush. Stan Bush, of course, best known for his work with the Transformers franchise, You've Got the Touch, blah, blah, blah. But really, who has done so much more melodic rock outside of that. And of course, he's also well known for a lot of 80s action films where he did the theme music for that, particularly Van Damme movies, But this guy never stopped. And his best albums really have, he's never had a bad one, in my opinion. But his music somehow, being 40 some odd years in this gig, is just only getting better now. And part of it is that I think it's that same thing like we were talking about with Manowar and Eternal Champion, where he plays it with such sincerity. It's cheesy, it's kitschy, whatever, whatever terms you want to use. But he plays it with such sincerity, you buy it and you love it. And he's gotten to the point where, sure, he knows his bread and butter is in making like these kind of corny, 80s action movie style songs. Yeah, you can do it. You're going to win, blah, blah, blah. But again, his talent is unquestioned and his sincerity is fully on display. And so it works. There's some really cool songs. In fact, I think one of them is going to be on like the new Shadow Warrior game. But anyway, Born to Fight is what it opens up with. Badass song. H.E.A.T, another great song. Again, I mean, it's not heavy, right? I mean, this is purely in the realm of melodic rock. He'd fit in right next to like Rick Springfield and Richard Marx in many ways. Boy, that'd be a triple header. But then, of course, he did release a song, I want to say in 2019, called The 80s. That was all about the 1980s. And he did finally put that out. That was originally just like a summer single. He did end up putting it on this album, and it fits in with everything that's going on there. So I appreciate it. I don't think that this album, it's great. It's not as solid as The Ultimate. I don't know if he's ever going to top that album. It's on par with Change the World, which was his previous release that he did. Certainly better than, was it Dream the Dream? I think was the album that came out after In This Life. In This Life is a fucking masterpiece. But bottom line, I mean, it's up there with his best stuff. Okay. Might not be up there with The Ultimate. That's a very unique animal. You only get a once in a lifetime shot at making an album that fucking good. but it's right up there. Really, really solid stuff from Stan Bush. If you know what he does, you're going to love it. So let's move on to number 5. Number 5 was a pleasant surprise. And this is one of those cases, like I was mentioning earlier, where Ellen and I were working out, and Ellen basically said, yeah, just, pop something on. And because usually what I'll do is I'll ask, all right, so what are we feeling? Like, do we want some, want something heavy? Do we want something that's going to make us want to, put the weights through the wall? Do we want something that maybe we can dance to in between? I don't know, whatever. What do we want to listen to? And she was just like, yeah, go ahead and put something on, because I'm adding, almost by the day, I'm adding new music up onto Plex. And there was this album that I just happened to catch. It was called, it's by a guy, Cristiano Filippini, who I don't know who that is, but Cristiano Filippini's A Flame of Heaven. Now, the idea of putting somebody's name before a band name is certainly a practice that has increased in use as late. And I think it's a way of trying to make a differentiator, even though, now I don't know Cristiano Filippini, but even though the person's name, I mean, they might have played in a band that was, big in Switzerland or something, which is fine and great. I'm not knocking that at all. But it might not be something that you would recognize, say in the States, or perhaps even in, broader Europe or other parts of the world. So it's kind of a marketing tactic to make it seem like, oh, this must be kind of a big deal. And I get it. You got to do whatever you can to get people streaming your music. I understand. And I'm not even saying that's what happened here with Flames of Heaven. I'm just saying, I recognize it's a trend, and it's a trend that I think people might be getting a little bit sick of, but I hope that it worked for this album, because this was such a surprise. So it's Cristiano Filippini's Flames of Heaven, and the album is called The Force Within. It's not a terribly long album as far as song list, but each song, clocks in at about 5 to 6 minutes. This is really epic. You can tell that the lead singer, English is probably not their first language. There's just that certain sound to it, where that they're trying to, like, they're overcoming a bit of an accent to hit certain highs, like with English. And I'm not knocking anybody for any of this, because most of the music I listen to now do not come from bands in America. Okay. And where it's abundantly clear, that English is a second language to them. There's no knock here at all. I'm just saying you're going to notice it, and it's interesting to take note of, but man, does this album just hit really, really epic. Nice judicious use of some synth in there and some symphony. Really, really epic stuff. I mean, the cover of the album, has just this giant, like, angel holding a sword. I mean, really, really, in like all neon colors, really cool. But We Fight for Eternity, Lightning in the Night, just awesome, awesome songs. And this guy hits some highs with his voice, and the guitar solos, top notch. It was a total surprise, because I didn't read any reviews for it beforehand. Basically, this was a case where I saw the album cover. It's like, oh, well, that looks interesting. And of course, like I said, putting the name in front of it, well, maybe he's somebody, even though I don't necessarily recognize the name. When I get around to it, I'll check it out. But when I checked it out, ended up living up to all the hype, right? Or, just the simple hype of the album cover and kind of the branding. Neptune, that was one that I had read a review for. Otherwise, admittedly, I might have, just not bothered with it. But I read the review, and the guy was basically saying, it's like, you're not going to believe this when you hear it. And he was right. But with Flames of Heaven, yeah, that was really on a lark, and just a shot in the dark there. And it paid off. Awesome album. So let's go on to number 4. I'm actually going to switch around what I have number 3 and number 4. Number 4, and oh man, I hate to do this, but again, you're in the top 8. You're great. Don't worry. Amaranthe came out with a new album. Now, this is one of my top bands, certainly in recent years. And I've been listening to them since their self-titled album, since The Nexus, since Massive Addictive, since, been listening to them right along. And their albums, anytime an album is coming out is, just the anticipation is through the roof for me. So they came out with their latest. It's called Manifest. It's good. Now, for Amaranthe, being good basically means it's 10 times better than just about what any other band on the planet does. But admittedly, in comparison to their previous release, which was that was Lixx in 2018. I think the only thing that beat Amaranthe in 2018 might have been H.E.A.T. I think H.E.A.T might have came out with an album that year, and that took it. But regardless, it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't exactly compare to Lixx. It's not at that level. Now, granted, their album previous to Lixx, which was Maximalism, while that had an awesome opening track, that didn't live up to its previous albums either. So I don't want to say that they've gotten into a pattern of where it's like every other album's, every album's good, but every other album's great. I don't want to say that they've gotten into that at all. But this is one, I don't know. It didn't land for me. And I know I have really high expectations for an Amaranthe album, but it really, they got very experimental, and I don't mind them experimenting at all. But it really didn't land. There's some good songs. Viral, I thought was a killer track. That was the first single that they released off of it. There's a song Strong that has, they do a duet, or, Elise Rid, the lead singer, she does a duet with, the lead singer of Battle Beast, another one of my top bands. What's her name? Nura Luimo. I think, I know it's Nura, but anyway, that's a solid song. And it's great to have that mix between Battle Beast and Amaranthe, because I think they're kind of in the, they're certainly in a similar style. There's a song Boom, which is lyrically really cool. Like, I love the lyrics in the song. It feels a little tongue in cheek, but it works. They also included, depending upon what edition you get, they also included their cover of Sabaton's 82nd All the Way. And that's an awesome track. That really, really kicks. So yeah, I liked Manifest, but it's far from the first album I'm going to put on by Amaranthe. I'm going to put on Massive Addictive, or The Nexus and Lixx, before this. So is what it is, but it was still, again, it's still Amaranthe. So it still leaps and bounds above what anybody else is really doing out there. So it's got to be on the list. Let's go to number 3. Originally I was going to have Amaranthe in at number 3, but I'm calling an audible here. Number 3, I'm going to give to a band that I haven't been able to put at the top ever, but I've loved their work for over a decade now. And that is Iron Savior. Iron Savior is a really cool band that does, they have, like, Iron Savior, the name is actually the name of a ship, a spaceship. And the albums generally are concept albums telling more of the story around this ship and its crew, the Iron Savior. It's a very well done concept. They execute it, to perfection, in my opinion. And it just adds a lot. And the music's great anyway, right? I mean, because you can have a great concept, but if your music sucks, what does the concept really matter? No, they deliver on both fronts. With this new album, Skycrest, that came out in 2020, they shook things up. It looks like they tried to, and I can't identify what every song is about right away, but it looks like they're basically trying to, and this is sort of like Star One, right? Where Star One made songs that were about movies or books, that are either science fiction or fantasy, right? Like they did Stargate, Dune, 2001, and so on, but they turned them into metal songs. And of course, that's a tremendous album if you've never listened to it. Actually, they have multiple albums, but Star One's phenomenal. Anyway, Iron Savior was kind of doing the same thing here. Now, it opens right up with the song Skycrest. And I mean, it's just heavy, and really, really good rolling thunder in it. Just awesome beat. And the singing, of course, great melodic highs that really the voice, the lead singer's voice will get to. But where it really shines is, again, it's track for track. Like every song on it is great. But then it gets to a song called There Can Be Only One. And you and I know what that is. And it is a song about Highlander. I mean, just listen to the lyrics. It is all Highlander. And I can't believe how good that song is. I mean, that will make your fist pump. You'll be swinging swords, whatever. I mean, you are on when that track particularly hits. I think this album's just a masterpiece. And it makes me wonder, like, how much greater, and I want to be very particular in how I say that, how much greater could Iron Savior be, if they played on this train of, okay, instead of doing giant concepts, we'll do more single song. And it's not like they haven't done it before, but you get my point. If they concentrated more on single song affairs than on the big concepts, where could they take this? Because I mean, this album's fucking awesome. It's just mind blowing how good it is. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see where they go next. But I hope they don't quit. And boy, I hope whatever the metric of success is for an album today, I hope they hit it with this more so than ever, because they deserve it. And it firmly belongs in the top 3 albums of 2020. Just for the song, There Can Be Only One. But really, every song on that damn album is I mean, it doesn't let up. From Skycrest down, it just doesn't let up on you. I mean, there's a couple, a little slower stuff, but really, I mean, it just keeps hammering. Let's go to number 2. Number 2 is, this is an album that I had said earlier in 2020, pre-pandemic, by the way, that I had said, yeah, nothing's going to top this. Unless Beast in Black came out with a new album this year, there is nothing that could possibly top this. But as you know now, it's at number 2. How did this happen? What's the story here, Stallion? Well, let's talk about this album first. Then we'll talk about what is actually at number 1 for best album of 2020. Number 2 is from the band H.E.A.T. Of course, that's H.E.A.T, H.E.A.T, and it's called H.E.A.T 2 is the name of the album. It's a fantastic album. Corny and cheesy as fuck. They're singing about partying and drinking, whatever, not partying and drinking, but partying and having sex and whatever else, they happen to be singing out. I mean, singing about. When you know H.E.A.T, you know what it's about. I mean, this is just some of the best melodic hard rock ever done. Not in 2020, not in the 21st century. I mean, just flat out ever. As long as that genre has existed, they're doing it at their best. I mean, this is pure class. Has been from their first album onward. And almost every year that they've had an album come out, it's taken the number 1 spot for me, because they're that damned good. And this album's no exception. There's nothing wrong with this album. It might not have been as strong as The Great Unknown. I wouldn't say it's as good as that album, but it's right on par. I mean, it's like right there, I loved it. And I mean, this is an album that I played over and over again for a good month or two, basically really until the pandemic hit. And it opens right up with the song Rock Your Body. I mean, that's what's going on there. There's a kind of a surprise track in there called We Are Gods, which is just a fantastic celebration of life. And I think a lot of interesting little truths inside that song that I really appreciated. Again, a song that has great melody, great guitar riffs, but then it also has that lyrical density. How about that? So track for track album. You're guaranteed a good time when you put on a H.E.A.T album, and H.E.A.T 2 is no exception. However, it is in the number 2 spot, which surprised even me. And it didn't get booted out of the number 1 spot until December of 2020. And it got booted by a band I had never heard of before. The band is called Palace, and it's led by a guy named Michael Palace. That's where the name comes from. Holy shit. I saw the album cover. It's like, okay, that's cool. That's got, nice little 80s kind of retro neon vibe to it and all this, which has become a popular thing really since like 2018. And that's fine, and it's clearly a band out of Sweden, I'm guessing, or Finland, maybe, one of those. But I put on the first track and my head exploded. Not because it's like that heavy. It's actually lots of synth. It's hard rock, a bit lighter, but there's such an injection of like that crisp 80s goodness. It opens up with a song called Rock and Roll Radio, which of course is the title track because the name of the album is Rock and Roll Radio. And just like the Iron Sabres album, it just doesn't let up. It just keeps going. Now, there's slower songs, there's nice ballads within it, but the guitar hooks, the production level, everything going on in it. If I played it for you right now, I guarantee, and I didn't tell you it was from 2020, you'd say, who remastered that album from 1987? Sounds great. I am always in awe when a band puts out an album that somehow can emulate the exact style of decades previous. For example, a band I've brought up in recent segments on Sovryn Tech that are recent as in the past year, I guess. Classic 78. Classic 78, it's with a K. Classic 78 is not a tribute band necessarily, but is a band, a group of guys who put out 2 EPs a few years ago that they were trying to kind of recreate that 70s Kiss sound, because of course Kiss, doesn't do their 70s sound really anymore, even when they put the makeup back on, right? And look, I'm not knocking them Kiss is my favorite band. I think that Monster and Sonic Boom are fantastic albums. Am I going to say it sounds like the 1970s, that somehow it sounds like, the sequel to Rock and Roll Over or Destroyer? By no means do they sound like that, nor do they have to. That's okay. Bands can evolve. That's fine. But Classic 78 somehow pulled it off in making songs that sound like they would have been the sequel to Rock and Roll Over or Love Gun. And that's insane that you can pull that off, right? Absolutely insane, because you really would think that those songs were made in 1978. Well, with Michael Palace, or with Palace, you really would think that these songs were made in 1987. And they clearly went with a style. Like, they knew what they were doing. And I think I've read some reviews where people where the reviewer will say, well, if they just added a couple of modern flourishes, this album could have been on a whole other level. I disagree. And they can put in modern flourish. Like, this is actually their 3rd album. Of course, I went back and listened to their previous 2, and they're both amazing and could have taken album of the year on their respective years. They had their first album was Master of the Universe from 2016. Second album was Binary Music in 2018. Now this is their 3rd, Rock and Roll Radio, in 2020. So they can put in the modern flourish. Those albums still, you can clearly hear, like, Rock and Roll Radio isn't a dramatic departure from those albums at all. They definitely have a style. But I am so glad that Michael Palace seems to almost kind of held back and made sure that this sounded like something that would have came out in 1987, even though it's 2020. I mean, seriously, if this album did come out in 1987 or even 1990, you would have you'd be shoveling it out of the backs of the trucks because people would just be clamoring for it so hard. I mean, there'd be so many copies sold. It'd be insane. The album is that fucking good. The songs are that catchy. But still have that lyrical density. They're still telling a story, right? The opening track, Rock and Roll Radio. I mean, just amazing. And it's so, this is the other beautiful thing too. For it to come out in 2020 when everybody's depressed as fuck, for this to be such a celebration and such a happy album, man, that was needed coming out of that. I think for a lot of people, and if you were feeling that or still are, here's your upbeat, baby. Here's your tempo. Here's your increase. In tempo. This is amazing. Anyway, track for track, every song on here is great. It's not just good, it's great. But the highlights, certainly the title track, Rock and Roll Radio. There's another one called Cold Ones, which is a beautiful song about how, we have such it's upbeat. Like it's a rocker. It's not a ballad. Okay. But the song is about how we could never go where the people who fall out of love go because our love is so powerful. Beautiful, beautiful shit. Then there is a ballad, that being Eleonora is and even that's great too, right? Because you remember that when we used to get, whatever songs that were just like the name of a gal, right? Like Europe would do, or, with Carrie, or like Starship, right? Sarah, something like that. Like it was so great to have a song like that again. Just works. And then the pinnacle on this album for me is right smack in the middle. It's a song called Hot Steel. Now, if you can make a song, perform it with that sincerity, have that amazing riff, synth going everywhere, but the guitars are flying. And you can actually, in that song, you can use the lyrics, turbo laser beams, Yeah, the lyrics are amazing. You're wired to fulfill my desires, my technosexuality. Just fucking A, man. It's so great. It's such a killer album. This album will just knock you on your ass when you put it on. And again, you're going to feel like you're in 1987 again. Now, if you've never been to 1987, perhaps it wouldn't have the same meaning. I'm open to that. But I was there and even though I was a little guy, I loved it. And man, does this album do it all? And it's not a requirement, though a point, there is a concept, an abstract concept that I think that needs to get explored more on Sovryn Tech and that we will discuss more. And it's not original to me, but I do want to explore it a lot. And that is that humans have such an obsession with innovation. We oftentimes innovate past perfection. And yes, that is possible. We innovate, we create past what was as good as it'll ever get, or what is the, most, whatever. And this may not necessarily be so true for music because again, art can be very subjective. Okay. So, but I think with electronics, with devices, with cars, with all kinds of things, I think we've reached some peaks and some pinnacles that we are trying to innovate past when, just because the market has to have endless growth or, the mixed market has to have endless growth. We go past some things without them being explored enough. And I guess that's where I relate it here is that style of music, from the 80s and 90s, that melodic hard rock has not been explored enough. And it's happening in Europe, and it's being sadly largely ignored in America. But this album by Palace, Rock and Roll Radio, is one of those cases where I am so glad someone went backwards and brought it to now to show people how it's done. And man, I could get into such big conversations around this that I've talked about before on Sovryn Tech around the 80s, like that, it seemed like in the 90s, just music started to become incredibly depressing. certainly in the metal scene. And I mean, look, it's not like it wasn't before either, but the prevalence was a lot of depressing shit, as to where, sort of the upbeat and the happy, kind of parties seemed to disappear in many ways, or just went more underground. I don't want to get into that whole conversation. I'm just saying that I'm glad somebody made an album that was just balls to the wall joy. And they did it. H.E.A.T did it too. I mean, like a lot of these albums kind of pulled that off. Stan Bush, I think, kind of pulls that off here. But man, that Palace album, I can't say it enough just how amazing this album is. This is it's just one of the best albums ever made. Straight. That's it. If there's a top 50 albums, it'd be in the top 50. Easy. So there we go. There's our number one for 2020. So let's break down the list again quick, and then I want to get into some notable mentions here. Neptune with Northern Steel at number 8. Eternal Champion with Ravening Iron at number 7. Number 6 is Stan Bush with Dare to Dream. Number 5, Cristiano Filippini's Flames of Heaven, The Force Within. Number 3 is Amaranthe's Manifest. Number 3, wait, that was number 4. Number 3 is Iron Savior's Skycrest. And then number 2 is from H.E.A.T, that being H.E.A.T 2. And then from Palace at number 1, Rock and Roll Radio. Now let's get into some of the mentions here. The album that I was really excited for, that I think frankly bombed. And I have some questions about this album actually. But Bon Jovi was supposed to come out with an album back in March. Then he delayed, and he came out with the album. It didn't come out until I want to say like later November or early December. And he named the album 2020. That's the name of the album. It sounds like, based on some of the interviews that I've read, it sounds like he actually went back and like redid the lyrics. I mean, I'm not going to take any... Boy, if anybody has lyrical density, really, Bon Jovi's got it. I mean, the guy's a fantastic lyricist, and has no problem singing about really deep subjects. But this album just didn't work. But it sounds like there might have been a completely different album earlier in the year, because he said he specifically wanted this album to address what everybody's feeling in 2020 due to the pandemic and everything else, and the protests and whatever else. Now, that wasn't true, back when this album was supposed to come out earlier in the year. So I wonder here if there was supposed to be some other kind of album, and Bon Jovi, who I think is genuinely kind of a caring guy, has said that, well, this would be completely out of place if we release this right now. Let's put out this album instead. This album just didn't work. It opens right up with a song called Limitless. Doesn't work. I mean, it sounds like, and I know, frankly, ever since Have a Nice Day, which is ultimately, I think, the last great Bon Jovi album. And that was 2005 when that came out. Ever since Have a Nice Day, or after that, every album, it sounds like he's basically been trying to be like Bruce Springsteen, which is like his idol. So I get it, but he's not Bon Jovi anymore. Right? that attitude's gone. And it's not just because Richie Sambora is not there anymore either, I don't think. Because this was going on while Richie was with him. It's probably part of the reason that he left. I don't know. I'm guessing, but there it is. Really, this is really disappointing to me. What was not, speaking of Richie Sambora, I didn't get this in, but Amaranthe, which was Richie Sambora's love interest there in 2019. And then they kind of separated a bit. I don't know what's going on there, but she came out with an album this year that was dynamite. That's worth checking out. I mean, and she's just, guitarist, and she'll do some vocals behind too, but that was fantastic. Check out Amaranthe. If you never listened to her previous albums, check those out too. Amaranthe's phenomenal. But anyway, yeah, Bon Jovi's 2020. Nope. Didn't work. I was so disappointed. This is the first time, because I'm a big Bon Jovi fan, and I've put up with, This House Is Not For Sale, Burning Bridges, which that kind of came out of nowhere, or even The Circle, and so on. I've put up with those albums, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I see what you're doing. That's fine, and they're okay. But I've never had an album where I listened to it and it was just like from Bon Jovi where I was like, oh no, that's not good. That's it's just never happened. So 2020, the year of the impossible, I guess. But moving on, let's switch it up. So I'll mention a couple of other albums that came out from pretty big name bands. Deep Purple came out with a new album this year, amazingly. It was called Whoosh. That is the name of the album with the exclamation point and everything. It's not bad, but amazingly, a lot of people were saying, oh, wow, this is like Deep Purple's best album in 20 years. No, you haven't listened to their albums in the past 20 years because those are some of their best ever. This one, it was good. I love it. And I love Deep Purple, but it certainly did not live up to their past couple of releases, as far as, really hard hitting and, just interesting. I don't know. It wasn't there. It worked. I liked it. I've listened to it many times and I will continue to listen to it, into the future, but it was nowhere near as good as their past couple of releases. I was really disappointed by that. And it really disappointed though, because so many people were billing it as like, wow, this is like a return to form for them and all this stuff. Like, no, I mean, it's great, but cause it's Deep Purple. So it automatically puts it a cut above other music, but it's not like great Deep Purple, in my opinion. So I'm not knocking it. It's a good album. It's just not great. Then we had AC/DC, amazingly out of nowhere, came out with a new album in November, and brought Brian Johnson back in, and everything. That was called Power Up. It's an AC/DC album. That's all there is to say, like, okay, it's AC/DC. There's, I don't feel like there's anything, really experimental here. It sounds like every other AC/DC album. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that that's a thing. And that's the case here. Okay. Frankly, I think like the last was a Black Ice. I thought Black Ice was an awesome album. I mean, they've had great later albums. Stiff Upper Lip was a great album. Black Ice was a great album, but I feel like they even kind of got a little experimental, did a little bit of different tunes with Black Ice. Like the song War Machine was really different. And yeah, I just wish they'd kind of shake it up a little bit. I don't know. It was good. It's AC/DC and you got what you expected, and yeah, they can put out an album and it's going to do great no matter what, but really you just kind of got what you expected. So that's the reason that it didn't end up on the list. The single that they released, Shot in the Dark, I love the song. The rest of the album, plays similarly, but yeah, there wasn't enough there to like warrant it as, wow, what an amazing album by AC/DC. Yeah, I mean, it was good. Again, I just didn't feel it like at a level where it deserves like real mention in some kind of top list. I mean, if there was a top 25 albums of 2020, it'd probably be in there, but maybe top 50, definitely. But in the top 8, I just can't see it. Then Nightwish also came out with a new album, which was Human to Nature. They have some very funny way of writing that out. This was pretty good. I haven't been the biggest fan of Nightwish's tenure with Floors Jansen. I thought that what was her name? Annette Olson was brilliant. I mean, you have to, make up for losing Tarja, right? And I mean, Tarja's brilliant. And I think Annette Olson did a good job. Floors is great, but this got a little folky and a little less epic. I mean, there's a song Music, which I think was like the main track or, kind of the lead single for it. That was good. But the rest of the album, I don't know. It went different places and that's okay. Right? Like, it's not like I'm being contradictory here and saying, well, I wish AC/DC would go other places, but Nightwish can't. It just wasn't, it wasn't in the vein of like the amount of epicness. There's an expectation when Nightwish comes out with an album, right? Like you don't expect them to do, I don't know, something that sounds like the White Stripes, or whatever, it just, I didn't really feel it. That's all there is to it. And I do miss, Annette Olson being there. I thought she brought like a certain youthful vigor that band's like epicness really needs. That was missing, unless you just have that incredible presence of Tarja Turunen. I mean, you know, if you've got that, okay. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't like terribly disappointed, but just, I don't know. It didn't live up to, you know, previous Nightwish releases. Granted, a lot of recent Nightwish releases haven't lived up to previous Nightwish releases. So there you have it. Or no, okay, wait, because I feel like I just complained for about 4 albums. I want to give you a couple of albums to check out from years previous to 2020 that I only discovered really this year that I think are worth taking a look at. One of them is by a band that's actually been around for a little while, that being Crazy Lixx, and they had an album come out in 2019 called Forever Wild. This album's awesome. It has some stylings to it that probably haven't been attempted in a good 30 years. It opens up with a real nice, sexy track called Wicked. I mean, this is real sleaze rock, right? Real cock rock. And most of the songs hit that. It's a track for track album. The end song, Never Die, Forever Wild, fantastic. I mean, good messages in it, you know, like keep going and, you know, go ahead and have the good time and all. I mean, I think that's great. But there's a song on there called Silent Thunder, where clearly they're trying to pull off sort of like a King Cobra, Never Say Die, Iron Eagle, you know, kind of song, where it's like a song that could fit in a Top Gun movie. And it really works. I'm impressed. Like I really wanted to put on a shmup, you know, and you know, fly a fighter jet or a starfighter of some kind and go to town listening to the song, because it really delivers on that. So you want to check that out. Again, that's from 2019. Somehow I missed it in 2019 because I absolutely would have had it on the top 8 because it's a track for track album and has a great attitude. And that song Silent Thunder alone, to try and create like a Top Gun-esque song, sort of like a Mighty Wings kind of thing, right on. The other album I want you to check out is actually from 2018, but it is the band's latest release, and that band is Icarus Witch. The album is Goodbye Cruel World. The title track for it is awesome. That being, you know, Goodbye Cruel World. The second track, Misfortune Teller, really great groove. This is Icarus Witch is kind of a tough, they're just heavy metal. Don't put them in a subgenre because they'll play anything. They're just heavy metal, you know, old, and I don't want to call them old school either, but they've just got that great style. You know, they've got in, you know, the melody, singers are always, you know, top notch, or at the very least, you know, they hit their highs, you know, they do the job. It's fantastic. You got to check out Icarus Witch. I think you're in for a really, really good time. If you're in for some, you know, real, I mean, yeah, I know I used the word classy before. I think this is really classy metal, as in it's metal that, you know, it hits straight to head. It doesn't get overblown in any way. Not that I don't mind overblown metal at all. But it's just straight shooting heavy metal, you know, which is rare. I feel like in many cases today. Not that I don't mind, you know, other places that metal wants to go. I'm just saying it's really cool to have a band out there that, you know, basically, you know, has their heart on their sleeve and is just playing that great metal. And they deliver on that. So yeah, Icarus Witch, their latest album, again, Goodbye Cruel World, man. And boy, listen to those bass lines too. Woo. Anyway, so a lot of fun. All right. I think that wraps up our top 8 albums for 2020. There's a lot to listen to here. I mean, just in what I've mentioned, there were so many more albums that came out this year. There were so many reissues that came out this year, like Halloween reissued a lot of their albums, and totally worth going back and listening to. I mean, there were tons. And of course it makes sense because, you know, why not reissue albums, you know, or put out live albums or compilations or whatever, you know, when not everybody can get in the studio together, even though that in and of itself in music production is a bit of a rarity even before 2020. But regardless, I'm okay with it because a lot of those albums needed a good revisiting, needed to get, you know, a real remastering and a decent re-release. I mean, like Rock Candy Remasters put out, or Rock Candy Records, I guess, man, they put out so many amazing, like a lot of Paul Sabu stuff they re-released this year. Yeah, there's a lot of gems to look into. If you have a good site where you look at all the albums that have come out in 2020, I mean, just pop it in the rock and metal section, and even the reissues, you're going to have endless listening to check out. So, but in this top 8, I guarantee you're getting some of the best. And that fucking Pellis album, holy shit. Go listen to it right now. You are in for a time, baby. We'll wrap this one up here. More top 8s for 2020, where it's applicable, will be coming soon. I will see all of you on the other side.